Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to share with you this afternoon my thoughts about how to write and publish a good scientific paper. As by way of disclosure, I must say I'm associated with Search and Write, which is a publishing and research organization. And I'll start by saying that it's usually not so uh, important to start out as a good writer from the beginning, and actually that's unusual. Writing comes with experience. Becoming a good writer will come with experience as we write more and more. But what's the value of writing and publishing? Why should we write at all? I think that it increases knowledge. It also influences change in practice and can also strengthen mentoring. And one of the key things that it does to us when we write and publish is that it makes us more humble and very respectful of the thoughts and opinion of others. So who should write? I always think that anybody who has something to say should write. It doesn't matter whether you're in an academic institution, whether you are in a research institution. The important thing is that you have something to say, and we should write when we have something to say. Um, and we shouldn't be afraid to write and publish. It doesn't have to be a new discovery. I know sometimes people say that everything has been written in their field, especially if it's a very narrow specialty, and they complain that they cannot reinvent the wheel. But surely, I always say we can modify the wheel. The wheel as we know it today is not the wheel as was invented from the beginning because technology has changed so much. And we should put our thoughts into writing and publishing. And I'll give you an example. Several decades ago, Watson and Crick published their double helix DNA structure and they got a Nobel Prize for that. But they were not the first to think about that or come up with that structure. They were just the first to get it published. Others before them who did not get it published didn't get the credit. So we shouldn't allow our thoughts and our opinion to go with us. We should write and publish. So why do people write and why should we write? It should be out of a genuine desire to advance knowledge and practice, and also possibly for academic promotion and career progression to obtain a degree or qualification, and sometimes for financial gain, especially when we write for industry and pharma companies. Sometimes they pay for that. But we should not be writing because we want to show off our knowledge or for personal pride. There are about eight key steps that I think should guide our writing and publishing, and I will go through each one of them very quickly. First is the conception of the research work of the paper. That's the thought or the idea that we want to write. Once we think about it, we should then look at what others have done. Many times we get an idea or a thought because of difficulty or challenges we have experienced or what others have experienced. But I must emphasize that a good paper can only come out of a well designed and executed research work. Once we get a thought, an idea, we must look at the literature. What is the existing current knowledge? What are the current gaps? Because that will help to justify our work. What gaps is our work trying to bridge? Do we have any innovation? Is there any novelty in our work? We can only know that if we review existing literature. And I've put down what some of the key steps should be when we review the literature, from looking at the background information to justifying our work. And then we decide on the type of paper we want to write. Again, this will depend on the type of research we have done or the type of knowledge we've thought about, the idea that we've thought about. But I've just put there the evidence-based level of biomedical research sitting at the top of the pyramid. meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and randomized control studies. And down the line, we have the other types of study. So really, the best quality are those sitting at the top of the pyramid. And really, what we write will depend on the kind of research work that we have done, from some control trials, meta-analysis, down to just writing meeting reports. So having decided on the type of paper we want to write, then we get down to the actual writing process. And this really should be the time to showcase the quality of our research work. It must be done very carefully and meticulously. This is not something that we just jump into it, because it's such a crucial part of the paper we are trying to write. We should use the right grammar. It should be appropriate. We should remember that the language of communicating science is not the same language that we use in our day-to-day practice. There should be clarity of expression. We should be humble in our writing. We shouldn't overly praise ourselves or overly praise the work of others. We should be transparent in whatever we are writing about, meaning that we should, um, as much as possible, also write about the negative aspects of our research or the unsuccessful aspects. And most a typical research manuscript is structured from what we sometimes refer to as the IMRAD structure, from introduction through methodology and research to discussion. But there are other aspects: acknowledgement, references, tables and figures, and supplementary material. And everything ideally should be organized in this manner. Resist the temptation to put tables and figures within the results section. They can be distracting. Sometimes it becomes difficult to decide what details to put down, uh, because you don't want to put down too many unnecessary details, and you don't want to be too economical with the details you want to put down. So in helping us to decide, editors, reviewers, researchers, and publishers have come up with checklists and guidelines for almost any type of paper you want to write. And I encourage us to check the Equator Network, the website address is there, to look at whatever checklist exists. Even a case report has a checklist that helps us to put down at least the minimum required material to make our work, publication, as scientific as possible. And then, having written the paper, we need to decide on the audience. And this is important and should be done very carefully. Are we writing for a professional audience, for just general medical colleagues? Or are we writing for trainees or undergraduates? Are we writing for Nigeria as a country, for West Africa? Are we writing for the international community? This will guide our choice of journal. We should remember that if we choose the wrong audience, our paper may not be read or cited by colleagues, or it may even get rejected, and the benefit of what we are trying to say will get lost. Then we, having chosen the right audience, then we need to decide on what should be the journal we want to send our manuscript to. Ideally, we should make a list of 3 to 4 journals and choose the first one and send our manuscript there. Again, this should be done very carefully, and as much as possible, every author listed on the manuscript must go through and make intellectual contributions before we submit. Sometimes when you finish writing a paper, you think that, oh, this is the best that has ever been written, but then try giving it to a colleague, a trusted colleague, to go through, and you'll be amazed as to the amount of criticism. So we should give it to a trusted colleague, not somebody who will um, overpraise us or who will put us down, but somebody that we know will give us constructive criticisms. And then we should incubate the manuscript for a few weeks, say 2 to 4 weeks, and come back to it and go through it again and continue to and refine it until it gets to a point that we are happy with it to send for publication. Finally, before we send it out to a journal before we submit, always try to do an electronic grammar and spell check, so that you are not making the wrong statements. But at the same time, we should be careful that the computer doesn't help us to change the meaning of some of our words. Before sending to a journal, uh, look at the instruction for authors for that journal, because every journal has an in-house style and you must adhere strictly to it, otherwise that may lead to rejection. There are hardly, it's just an occasional manuscript that you will send to a journal and it gets accepted for publication right from the beginning. So as much, most manuscripts will get sent back for corrections and revisions. As much as possible, carefully look at the comments and suggestions from the reviewers, go through them, sleep over them, and for a few days, and come back to address them. Don't take the comments personal, because sometimes some of the comments can be very annoying. Sometimes some of them may look like insults or try to put you down, but that's not the aim. The reviewers are trying to make your manuscript as scientifically sound as possible. We should respond to every comment point by point, but remember that we are at liberty to either accept the suggestions or disagree with them. But you should not leave any, you shouldn't ignore any comment or suggestion. We should be transparent. Where we don't have the required information, we should simply say we don't have the data that is being requested, and then we should send back our revised manuscript in a very timely manner. If the journal says 2 weeks, please send it back in 2 weeks, within that 2 weeks. Otherwise, you risk it being now considered as a fresh submission. And then here comes the part that many of us don't like, that's dealing with rejections. There's hardly anybody who has been writing who has not had his or her paper rejected. It's not a problem. We shouldn't take it personal, and we should not be discouraged by it. When we get a rejection, what should we do? We should look at the comments carefully. Most journals will send back some comments stating why the paper was rejected. So we should look at those comments carefully, address them, keep the manuscript for a few weeks, and then come back to it, revise it again, and send it to another journal. Remember, you made a list of about 4 journals, so send it to the second one. So we should not abandon a rejected manuscript. I always say that any paper that has been written will find publication in an appropriate journal. Perhaps it's being rejected because you are not choosing the right audience, or the right journal. And because this is such an important aspect, I've put down some of the common reasons for rejection. Some are technical problems from incomplete data, or small sample size, or missing data through poor data analysis. Maybe you use the wrong statistical methods, or your methodology was inappropriate or flawed. And this is a very common reason for rejection. A flawed methodology means that that's so fundamental to the results and the discussion and the conclusion. So most journals will reject such manuscripts. Or if your research questions and hypotheses are weak, or are not backed, answered properly by the data that you have, or if you made inaccurate conclusions that are not based on the results that you have provided. Some are editorial reasons. So if you chose the wrong journal and your manuscript is not within the scope of that journal, it can be rejected. If you have not provided any new information or anything innovative, some journals may reject. If there are problems with consent and ethical approval, if your manuscript is not properly organized, if your references are out of date, or you have overly cited your own publications, and that may be read as a self-promotion, or your manuscript simply lacks clarity, and if there are some ethical issues in the publication uh, process, or what they think are ethical problems, and I will share that a little bit with us. So try to obtain ethical approval for everything you write, whether it's a case report. I'm sure many of us have heard about situations, gossips, kind of, where it's felt that somebody is publishing falsified data, or somebody, let's say, that case didn't exist. So getting an ethical approval gives credibility to our data and our publication and the paper we have written. So as much as possible, obtain ethical approval from an ethical committee. If the ethics committee thinks that you don't need an approval, they'll send you a letter, and that backs up your data. As much as possible, authorship and contribution problems should be sorted out right from the beginning before you write the paper, because this is such a contentious area that creates a lot of problems. So, and every author listed must understand the paper and must be able to take intellectual responsibility for the paper. Because ethical issues create problems, um, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has come up with 4 criteria which must be met. And all 4 criteria must be met by every author cited, and anybody who has met those 4 criteria must be listed as an author. And these criteria include making contributions to the conception or the study design or data acquisition or analysis, drafting the work or revising it with intellectual content or input, final approval of the version that needs to be published, and then agreeing and to be accountable for every aspect of the journal. We all know what has happened in the world of writing and publishing. Many papers have been retracted, and people in that institution or on that authorship list punished, and some of them come out to say that, oh, we didn't know anything about that paper. So don't agree to be listed as an author if you think that you have not met all those 4 criteria. What are the common ethical issues in the publication process? Remember that writing is a highly intellectual activity and must be guided by principles and ethics. And if we don't do this ourselves, then the public will force some control on us. So that's why some of these ethical issues are important. Conflict of interest. If you have any relationship with some drug company and that drug you are writing about it, you must declare it. Any funding that has been provided must be declared. Common ethical problems of what we consider as fraudulent practices include data fabrication, data inflation, duplicate publication, fragmentation, and I think the biggest of them that creates problems, authorship problems, gift authorship, deliberately excluding somebody who should be an author or forcing yourself into a manuscript that you don't know much about, and plagiarism. And one part of plagiarism we should be careful about is self plagiarism, but we will not go into too many details about it. As I round up, a few important tips about writing and publishing. Avoid saying your result is the first. Avoid unnecessary statistics. Avoid lengthy papers and avoid too many references. Very important, avoid predatory open access journals. And the question will be, what are these journals? You can go to the website of the Bees list. It's no longer being updated because of legal issues, but that website will give you an idea about some of the predatory journals. Mentoring is very important. Attending courses and workshops or getting a personal mentor, such that's some of the work that Search and Write does, and the details, contact details are there. In order to use the right language of science, the Strong's element of style and the Chicago Manual of Style are so important and very helpful. I found them right from when I was developing my writing capacity. Found them very helpful, and I still go through them. I still have copies of them. I think they are so important, and if you can get hold of any of them, that's very good. So thank you very much for listening, and we can take questions and comments. Thank you.